Coming up, proof that Ed Orgeron may already be in trouble at LSU. That is, unless he beats Florida on Saturday. We'll talk about that and more coming up next right here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to AT&T's SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. It is good to have Mike Johnson back with us here again today. You were missed yesterday, but as we said to the audience, taking care of some family business, and we certainly had our thoughts and prayers going out to you, and it is good to see you here once again.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Had a close person to me that was going into surgery yesterday. Wanted to be with them in case anything went south, and everything turned out good. So everything is, it's good to be back here, and it's good that everything went well yesterday.
Well, we're going to have a really fun show today. Zach Abolverdi, who covers the Florida Gators for SECCountry.com, he'll be with us about 40 minutes from right now. We'll talk to him about the big one in Gainesville on Saturday between the Gators and the LSU Tigers. A lot of fun coming up. In between then, though, and now, a lot of your comments, our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list as we start to dive into a lot of these games here this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's fun, and I do got to give you a compliment. It was interesting yesterday being on the other side of the window, other side of the glass, looking at the screen and watching you and Brandon Walker. And I tell you one thing I do take pride in with the show. It's the fact that neither you nor I act like we know it all. This is a community discussion, and I loved some of the comments you were getting yesterday in the comment section. Let's keep them rolling today.
Well, Wade Dukes in the comment section apparently disagrees with you. He says I need to take some time off, maybe a year or two. Wait, that's not nice. That's no way to start the show.
Come on, man.
You're better than that, or at least maybe one day I'll be better than that. Nonetheless, though, let's dive in here and remind you that AT&T SEC Country Live brought to you by AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T Entertainment your way. Speaking of that First and 10, let's go into it here with item number 1 on the list. And there have been a lot of bumps and bruises, I think it's safe to say, for LSU coach Ed Orgeron during his first season, but it may have sort of reached its apex last night with his coaches show. Now, first of all, credit where credit's due here. Almost no coach in the SEC still does a real kind of old school coaches show where you take phone calls. Mark Stoops apparently does, because we've shown some video of the Kentucky one already a couple times this year. The LSU fans, I guess, get their chance to talk to Orgeron himself as well. So credit's where credit's due here for the fact that Orgeron still even does this.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way I kind of pictured it playing out, at first I was like, what is the producer doing? And then I was like, you know what, Ed Orgeron, probably being the Orgeron that we know, was probably like, you know what, let those calls through. I want to talk to those people.
If you're wondering what I'm talking about here, let me show you a couple of the tweets that were kind of collected on the internet from what happened to Ed Orgeron and his coach's show last night. Here's one example of a fan getting pretty critical. Stellinger says, Orgeron told the caller, I earned the job, whether you like it or not. So this guy's basically going in on Orgeron about why he even has the job. Orgeron fires back, says, I earned the job. I think we have another one we can show you here of kind of something else that happened. Andrew Lopez on Twitter saying, a caller just called Edding Orgeron an alpha male, and Joe Oliva, the athletic director, quote, more feminine, more like a beta. That's quite a radio show right there. If you've got these assessments of the masculinity of the athletic director, one guy saying Ed Orgeron doesn't even deserve the job. I have a serious question for you coming off this, though. And I don't mean to stir the pot. I actually mean this in all sincerity. Is this the kind of thing that Ed Orgeron can come back from? Oof. When you've got this kind of vocal displeasure, people all of a sudden, now they're not afraid to tell you to your face that they don't think you're doing a very good job. Can Orgeron come back from this?
Most of the time, these don't have happy endings. We've talked about that a couple times when you talk about what Butch Jones is going through, what Barry Odom went off about last week. A lot of these times, this brings the coach out in a negative light, and this is something new in coaching. As far as I know, BA, and you go back a little bit farther than me, but this is the social media era. Everybody has an opinion, and you're going to hear this opinion from a lot of people. One of the most interesting comments that I heard come out of Ed Orgeron was, Joe Oliva's been very instrumental in our success. And I just couldn't help but kind of giggle at it, and I was like, what success is he talking about so far? Like, you haven't really done that much. If B's been very instrumental in the team that you've had so far this year, then they need to look in another direction ASAP.
Tyler Mann brings up a good point. Orgeron has to say he's the best AD he's ever worked for. Yep. That's the guy who could fire him at any point. And it may be true that Oliva's the only athletic director in all of the major sort of Power 5 schools that would have given Orgeron this other chance to be a head coach. Now, in fairness to Orgeron, there were some people at the time who said he should have gotten the USC job, but he didn't get it. I'm assuming he didn't get it for a reason. So Orgeron's allegiance to Oliva is partially based on the fact that Oliva deemed him worthy of being a big-time college football coach.
Well, and my problem with Joe Oliva is not just Ed Orgeron. It's the fact that he went after a couple of different coaches last year after he dismissed Les Miles in a 2-year debacle for Les Miles. You know, he fired him the year before, then brought him back, and then fired him again. And then it gets announced on Thanksgiving that Tom Herman's coming to LSU, and then all of a sudden he's not going to LSU, then he's going to Texas, and you're left in a corner. Joe Oliva is left in a corner, you know, sitting there holding his hands in the air, and he has no choice other than to hire Ed Orgeron in my book. And so it was a bad situation for Oliva. It's been a bad situation for Orgeron, and you see it playing out on the football field now.
Somebody in the comment section a moment ago said Joe's gotta go, spelled Geaux, a reference to obviously Oliva's probably somewhat tenuous job status as of right now. A couple more comments we're getting in the comment section here as well. Tony Mott says, O is the only coach that wanted that job. Baton Rouge smells like day-old corn dogs, which is a joke that's kind of been out there for a while. But I think this is also an example of how sometimes people make, I believe, too big of a deal out of a coach turning down a job. Yes, they probably went after Jimbo Fisher, and Fisher wanted to stay at Florida State. And yes, they went after Tom Herman. Herman chose Texas over LSU. And, you know, this idea of, well, you're supposed to be embarrassed because you offered the job, somebody didn't take it. The fact that you then had to turn around and sort of go to Ed Orgeron because he was the guy that's quote-unquote wanted the job, should LSU have done a little bit more of a search somewhere in between Fisher and Herman and getting down to the sort of interim coach, Ed Orgeron?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with how it played out in terms of having to go to Ed Orgeron. I think that he was probably your best option, and Joe Oliva, let's be honest, wasn't left with a ton of options. I think it's the buyout that he gave him. You know, now they're on the hook for $12 million 4 or 5 weeks into the season, and they're already, you know, second guessing what that is. Listen, this happened in my time at Alabama. You know, we fired Mike Shula, and Mal Moore goes after Rich Rodriguez, and he turns down the job and stays at West Virginia at the time, and everybody was like, you know, Alabama's just not one of those jobs that anybody wants anymore. You know, you're never going to be able to turn that program back around. It's not what it used to be under Bear Bryant. Those fans live in the past. Nick Saban a month later takes the job, and the rest is history. And so I think that's what LSU is in right now. I don't know that Ed Orgeron needs to be fired. I don't know that he's not the answer. But I don't think you can put it on Joe Oliva that neither one of those guys he went after last year really panned out.
Kyle Stutter of the comment section says, SEC country, tell everyone that the Gators are going to win by 100. I don't know if that's indeed going to happen, but we will talk about the Gators right now on item number 2 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And I've actually got a question for you that sort of dates back to something we talked about a little earlier in the week. But before we get to that, I want to give you a chance to hear from Steve Spurrier, who was on the ESPNU satellite radio show that he's a part of each and every week on Sirius XM Radio. And, well, he weighed in on his thoughts about the Florida LSU game, and it's probably not surprising here. Spurrier's still thinking back to the onus for what has made this such a big rivalry this year. The canceled game from 2016. Here was Spurrier on Sirius XM Radio kind of reminding people of why these two schools are at each other's throats so much right now. Here's the old ball coach.
Yeah, I think the Gators are going to be ready, and you got to believe LSU is going to be ready also. They're sort of got their backs to the wall down there, and we'll see. We'll see. But, yeah, last year's game was extremely important for Florida. You know, they were supposed to come here, and the hurricane came, and we couldn't play, so we tried to work it out. We had an open date, same time they did, and we were willing to play them then here on that open date, but they wanted that open date before they were going to kick Alabama's tail, and that didn't work out very well for them.
So the reason why I wanted to play the Spurrier audio is because I think from this week that really sets up a conversation that you and I have had so much over the last few months about when these two teams played, it was going to be a really big rivalry game. Now, earlier this week, you said, it's not an invalid opinion, I mean, I think a lot of people probably feel the same way that you do, that because LSU has struggled, you're not as excited about Florida LSU as you were before. What I predicted is by the time the end of the week got here, this would feel like a big game to you. It already did to me. I thought it would feel like a big game to you. Now that we're here, do you feel a little bit better, a little more excited about Florida LSU right now?
As much as it pains me to ever admit that B.A. was correct in his assessment of how I would feel at any point during the week, you're right. Yeah, I mean, you really are. Just look at these first two clips. And look how passionate LSU fans have been about Ed Orgeron's tenure. And listen to what Steve Spurrier is saying, where this is the 3-0 in the SEC Florida team. I think that when I looked at it earlier in the week, I kind of approached this game from you know, the way I look at games is X and O's wise. What's the game plan going to look like? And I think that's not everything you can look at. I think you have to look at this from a fanhood perspective if you're in my shoes and say, you know what? Neither one of these teams are going to be about X's and O's. This is not about how these teams line up because, let's be honest, whatever they draw up on offense probably isn't going to work out like they think it's going to in either direction for either one of these teams. And so I think really the drama comes from the fact that both of these teams are going to be scratching and clawing for a victory. LSU had their pride hurt last week, and they are going to do everything they can to get back there. Florida still has its whole season in front of them. They can still win an SEC title. They can still get in the college football playoff. And for those two reasons right there, I think the game still has a ton of passion and drama on the line.
Steve Weaver said getting excited about being Florida right now is not a very high bar, and I don't completely agree with that. Yes, Florida's not the same kind of team right now as probably Georgia, Auburn, Alabama are, at least if you look at the way that the eye test and the overall record. Gators may be in that next tier below those three, but LSU's a desperate team, and I don't mean this in any kind of backhanded way. I mean this legitimately. Desperate teams, I think, can be incredibly entertaining because LSU is going to play its Super Bowl on Saturday. And if it wins, it may have another Super Bowl after that. But for right now, this is the whole season. And I'm not saying that Orgeron would lose his job after 1 year, but he could certainly kind of put some of the Troy loss and some of that kind of stuff behind people, make them forget about that if he could beat Florida, a game that LSU fans really want now after what happened last year. I think the desperation status of LSU is a part of what makes this game, for me, intriguing on Saturday.
And to me, it's not only that, it's the matchup. Because I think what's so interesting about the desperation part of this matchup is this. You heard the Troy coach come out during this week and say, you know what? This was not a flash in the pan. We went in and played big boy football. We beat these guys at their own game. We were able to run the ball when we wanted to. That's why we came out with a victory. Guess what Florida's going to try to do this week? They're going to try to run the football with that big offensive line, knowing Felipe Franks is just getting back in the driver's seat on that offense, and they're going to try to run it down LSU's throat. They're going to use LSU's own game plan against them this week. I can't wait to see which team mans up. I think there's a lot of people on that LSU defense that understand they need to play a ton better, specifically that linebacking core. And Florida has its whole season ahead of them, and they're trying to really get their footing on offense. And so I think the way it lines up is going to be a special, special night.
Florida fan Daniel Bircher in the comment section says, I think Florida surprises people this week. A lot of backstory surrounding this, as well as the East-West cross-division bragging rights. I agree LSU's going to come out swinging, but Florida would be silly to overlook this game. And I don't think that Florida is overlooking this game at all, even though that it's got a tough stretch coming up, including Georgia here in about 3 weeks. But LSU, Texas A&M the next couple weeks, this is a chance for Florida to prove itself. They have won all their SEC games up to this point, but there are a lot of critics of the Gators in our comment section. You see them every day. They'll say that, well, Florida was lucky to beat Kentucky, lucky to beat Tennessee, and what do you really get for beating Vanderbilt? So this is a chance for Florida to kind of go out there and prove itself against an LSU team on Saturday that still counts as a quality win for Florida, even though LSU struggled somewhat.
Listen, for everything we think we know about the SEC East, for every time we look at Georgia and think, man, that looks like a team that could potentially make a college football playoff, Florida's still right there. I mean, these guys winning this weekend would make them 4-0 in the SEC and really in the driver's seat to control their own future. Not that Georgia's not, but Florida just a step ahead. And being able to deal with these tasks 1 week at a time and knock off these teams that you kind of question what you had in Florida each week after you played Michigan. What's Florida going to be this week? Who's going to play quarterback? How's their offensive line going to look? They continue to check off the boxes in the win column, and I think that makes them a dangerous team with Jim McElwain because we've seen the last couple of years that when they get the ball rolling in the right direction, they can make it to Atlanta.
That is Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. This is AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Let's move on here. Look at item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And Georgia running back Nick Chubb made an appearance on the Paul Feinbaum show this week, and he was asked the question a lot of people are wondering about right now. What makes this Georgia team right now different from previous Georgia teams? And specifically, is there something about Kirby Smart that's different from Mark Richt? Well, Nick Chubb played for both these guys. 2 years under Richt, now a second year under Kirby Smart. So when Nick Chubb was asked by Paul Feinbaum what makes these two guys different, instead of talking about the personality differences of the two coaches, and there may be some significant ones, Chubb actually talks about something a little more tangible and a little more specific. Take a listen to Chubb here in the Feinbaum show, then I want to ask you about this.
They're both different, not saying one's better than the other, but different is just different. But probably the biggest difference is the coaching staff now, we kind of had a year to get used to them. I know Coach Rick, when I was here, we had a different coaching staff, offensive staff. So now we had 2 consecutive years with the same staff. So that's probably the biggest difference, is everyone's kind of more comfortable here with these guys.
The numbers actually back Chubb up on that. If you look at scoring points per game, Georgia 5th in the league right now after being 11th in 2016, 9th the year before that in 2015. They're scoring almost 10 points a game right now, more than they did for the full 2016 season. So do you agree with Chubb that having Jim Chaney for a second year, an offensive coordinator, by the way, that got a lot of criticism during the offseason, including right here on our show AT&T SEC Country Live, but is the continuity a second year of Jim Chaney after having different offensive coordinators for every other year of Chubb's Georgia career? Is that really helping the Dogs this much?
I think it's a part of it. I think that Nick Chubb, if he really wanted to dive deeper into it and he was really giving an opinion that didn't steer away from Mark Richt, I think what he would say is that Kirby Smart's maybe attention to detail is really what separates the two. when I was in school, 2007, the season everybody talks about for Nick Saban that was a bad season, Major Applewhite was our offensive coordinator. You go on to Jim McElwain the next year and we go 12-2. And so that was something we had to kind of develop into, but it was Nick Saban's attention to detail. And I know that Kirby Smart carries the same mentality, where it's the small things. It's the ability to play to a consistent level. It's the ability to not go out there and get penalties on a consistent level. It's doing your job on special teams, allowing these guys to develop. It's the small things that, for me, in the Mark Richt regime, really got them in trouble, was just their lack of attention to detail sometimes. And I think that's something Kirby Smart's brought to Athens.
Well, I think there are 2 points to bring up here, and I think that you're kind of touching on one of them. Nick Chubb on the Paul Weinbaum show is not going to talk about what he thinks is different between Kirby Smart and Mark Richt, but you and I can, and there are a lot of things you can point out. You'll point out the practice stuff, the attention to detail stuff. The one thing I'm going to tell you is that Smart is a much better recruiter than Mark Richt was. Much better. He's upgraded the roster just in 2 signing classes in a way that Richt just was not getting it done. And by the way, if it wasn't for another Saban protege and Jeremy Pruitt working at Georgia the 2 years before that, you'd see an even more dramatic difference in the way that Kirby's recruiting compared to the way Mark Richt is. So that's a big difference between the two. But even if that is true, that doesn't mean that Chubb is wrong when he says, you know what, I'm also going to focus in on the fact that we are doing better offensively. And I don't know that you can necessarily draw a line between the fact they're more comfortable with Chaney than they were a year ago. But I'm also not going to discount that either.
No, I'm not either. And listen, there's been some good running backs under Mark Richt that have had great years. And so, I'm not ready to point to that either and say, well, you know what, it's because Jim Chaney's been there a couple of years. There was a lot of good running backs under Mark Richt, and it didn't really matter a lot of times what coordinator was in there. And I think here's what it comes down to, and I brought this up on Twitter the other day. To me, the personality of a football team, and I've said this to you a bunch about Kirby Smart, the personality of a football team is exactly what their coach is during the game. I look at Kirby Smart and I see a ton of energy. You look at Nick Saban, he looks businesslike. That's what Alabama plays like. I think Georgia right now plays with a ton of energy because that's what their head coach brings. I don't know that Mark Richt always had that energy. And to look over at the sideline and see Kirby Smart bouncing up and down and so excited when his team makes a stop, I think the rest of the team feeds into that.
John Rosado weighing in on this subject from the perspective of a Florida fan. He says, this is so good. I was talking to another Gator fan about Doug Nussmeier. They want him to be fired. Let me go down and get the rest of his comment here. They want Nussmeier to be fired, but it's the reason to keep a coach for the continuity for the players. Yeah. And that is true. I think we're in an era right now in college football where quality offensive coordinators are just a really scarce resource. There are not enough of them. The reason why is so many young offensive minds become head coaches quickly. Look at Lincoln Riley right now. He's only 33 years old. He's already the head coach at Oklahoma. And that's how fast offensive minds rise in the coaching ranks. So therefore, this thing where all college football fans, and truly every SEC fan base to a certain extent I believe is guilty of this, there's the nitpicking of your offensive coordinator, but more often than not, finding a way to keep the guy you have and hope he gets better is at times a better decision than running that guy off and hoping you're able to find the next genius, because the list of guys who can be the next genius, it just gets shorter and shorter every year.
Yeah, and listen, I think when you're a Florida fan, and this is how I look at the Florida scenario, I look at it the same way I do at Auburn. Gus Malzahn has kind of become hands-off. Now, it's kind of worked out for him. I think that he and Chip Lindsey have begun to work together. But to me, if you're firing Doug Nussmeier, and Jim McElwain was hired as a head coach to kind of develop these quarterbacks, why are you firing Doug Nussmeier? Jim McElwain's the guy running this offense, and I think you have to take a long look in the mirror if you're going to move on from your OC. I don't think Jim McElwain's going to let anybody else take the reins, but I'm with you. I don't see the need to move on from Doug Nussmeier yet. I don't think they have the players they need right now to run the system they want to, but hopefully that comes sooner than later for them.
Alan Verbanchik, a Georgia fan, saying, sweep the East, go Dogs. We'll talk more Georgia here in our comment section throughout the program today, but let me move on here for a moment. They'll bring up item number 4 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and you were saying something to me before the show today that I thought was kind of interesting. I don't necessarily agree with this, but I thought your point was kind of interesting, that it wasn't that long ago that on this show we were talking about the possibility of the SEC being left completely out of the playoff, and different national voices have suggested why that might be the case. I've even argued myself that it's maybe more of a possibility than some SEC fans want to think. But you said how quickly things have changed because of the rise of Georgia, the rise of Auburn, maybe other things you're going to point to, that actually we've gone from saying, how could the SEC be shut out of the playoff, to, is there a possibility that 2 SEC teams make the playoff? What is the most likely scenario in your mind where the SEC could get 2 in the playoff?
Yeah, I think there's a few different scenarios. First of all, you need a lot of other things to fall into place. I'm not by any means saying that the SEC is going to have 2 teams in there. I think you have to have like the round robins play out in the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and the Big 10. You have to have the round robins all play out where everybody starts to be up on each other, and one of those teams you don't expect to win that conference wins that conference. I think there's a couple of likely scenarios that would lead to 2 SEC teams being in the playoff. Bama and Georgia could get in if Bama loses to Auburn I'm sorry, if Georgia loses to Auburn, Bama beats Auburn, and Georgia beats Bama. Does that make a lot of sense?
Okay.
You got a little bit of a round robin there. I think there's a couple other scenarios where Auburn and Georgia could get in, or Alabama and Georgia, or even Auburn and Bama could get in if all the scenarios play right. But the thing to take away from this is that these teams have all elevated themselves, and they've all played games on a national scale to start the year. Bama's be able to beat Florida State. Auburn loses a close one to Clemson. And Georgia plays what a lot of people thought was a down Notre Dame team that looks really, really good right now. And so I think when you lock all those facts in, the more this thing starts to move on, there are going to be a ton of fireworks at the end of November.
I think the weirdest scenario here that could result in two teams making the playoff if somehow Georgia loses to Florida but runs the table against everyone else. It doesn't win the East, but it stands there as an 11-1 team at the end of the regular season. Maybe by comparison to what the rest of the country is going to be able to do. The Auburn-Alabama thing is the most difficult here because you'd be talking about, one of those teams having to get into the playoff after having already lost to one of the others. Whereas, I don't know that Florida could get itself in that two-team conversation there. I think the bottom line is, this goes back to something we actually talked about on the show earlier this week, that even though we're still a couple of weeks away from the first playoff ranking coming out, it is getting time now to start thinking about how these top national contenders are doing. And right now, there is a nice even spread among all of them. Clemson looks like an elite team from the ACC. Penn State looks like a pretty elite team from the Big Ten. They've probably got the Heisman Trophy favorite at the moment. Washington is hot right now in the Pac-12. Yep. Oklahoma looks like the makings of a playoff team in the Big 12. That's one per conference, and let's see how Notre Dame continues to rise here as well, already with the one loss to Georgia, but that's that independent there. You've got this situation where you've got a nice spread out here among the various conferences, and I think that makes it tough to get a second SEC team involved, and I don't think it makes a no-brainer even for the SEC champion. This is one of those things where it's probably time for the SEC fan to start paying a little bit of an attention to what's happening around the rest of the country.
I agree. I agree. And like I said, there's a few different scenarios where I could see two teams getting in. And obviously, you have to deal with all the other conferences. All the other conferences have to have those losses in there, and you have to start to question. And Bama and Auburn and Georgia all have to kind of dip into that top four. The reason I brought up Auburn and Bama both getting in, Auburn would have to run the table. Auburn would beat Georgia, they'd beat Bama, and they'd beat Georgia again. Okay. And that's the only way I think
that's actually a pretty interesting
point.
And
I could see, beating Georgia as a top 10 team twice would definitely get Auburn in the playoff, especially beating Bama as the number one.
Let me hit a few comments here. Courtney and Carletta says, Bama's got more haters? What? Yeah, there are some national haters of Alabama out there. Tyler Watson says, Auburn's coming on strong. They have a chance to take the West. And Tyler, it's one of the things I've been saying now for a few weeks, and Mike's been arguing for Auburn here too. This notion that you're going to completely discredit Auburn because it lost to Clemson, I think that's making too big of a deal out of just one game. For the moment, I do think Auburn's a team on the rise, and my expectation is that Auburn gets another easy win against Ole Miss on Saturday.
Yeah, and listen, I've been all in on it. I'm not a fan of a lot of times how Gus Malzahn has coached the last 3 years, but I do have to give him credit here where credit is due, that he has been able to evolve and merge him and Chip Lindsey's offense. They've had a couple of revolving doors on the offensive line. They seem to be set up on the offensive line finally to where Prince Tega can come in and play that jumbo position. You're going to have Golson playing left tackle. You're going to have Darius James playing right tackle. They really seem to like that lineup, and it has worked for them. And I think that has allowed them to, a little bit in Gus Malzahn's eyes, start to reset what they're doing. They can get back into the running game. Still need to get some players healthy, but I really like the direction they're going, and I got to give a little bit of credit to Gus Malzahn.
Brian Scott says Georgia and Alabama both make the playoffs. Chase Toole says Gators are getting better each week. We're going to win the East, put the SEC on alert after that. And so it's a Florida fan saying, hey, talk about Auburn on the rise. Maybe you want to count Florida in that conversation as well. For me, and I know that a lot of y'all think I'm just a Gator hater, so I'll say this and be careful the way I say it. I still got to see a lot more from Florida. Squeaking by Kentucky's not doing a lot for me. Squeaking by Tennessee's not doing a lot for me after Georgia went into its stadium and won 41-0. It's going to take more than what Florida's done this far to say this is a team that, much like Auburn's kind of getting hot at the right time. I'm still not sure about Florida just yet.
Yeah, listen, we talked about Colin Cowherd a couple weeks questioning if the SEC could get in without Bama. I think they definitely can, and I've highlighted a couple of those scenarios right now, but to me, the one doomsday scenario for the SEC would be Florida winning the SEC championship. And I it's nothing against Florida as a team. It just goes back to that week one games like I was talking about. All the other teams were either dealing with business or really close in Auburn and Clemson. Florida was not close, and they got dealt with by Michigan. And I think on a national stage, when you look back and you're the College Football Playoff Committee, that's going to be a tough loss for Florida to try to overcome and get into the playoff.
Darren Glover says Georgia and Auburn want to be going to the playoff because they're going to have they won't be going to the playoff because they're both going to have an embarrassing loss to Alabama. that kind of goes back to what you were saying before, that if Auburn were to win the West, having beaten Alabama, is beating Alabama as prestigious right now as winning the SEC. That if Georgia's the SEC champion or someone's the SEC champion, but Auburn says, yeah, but we got the head-to-head win over Alabama, something that the SEC East winner, if it's Florida or Georgia's not going to have, is that the kind of thing where that's just prestigious right now, is winning the whole league?
I think it is when you look at how the SEC has turned out, and Bama's going to continue to be number one or number two as long as they keep winning. And that's the scenario I mentioned, to get Auburn and Bama into the playoffs. I think if Auburn beats Georgia there in that second to last game, is able to knock off Bama as a 3-versus-1 or a 4-versus-1 matchup there at the end of the year for the Iron Bowl, and then beats Georgia again in the SEC championship, I think both Auburn and Bama might get into the playoffs.
We'll take a look in just a moment at some of the point spreads for the games this weekend with our MyBookie Best Bets. That comes up in just a moment. Before we get to that, though, speaking of Alabama, let's make them the subject of item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And this is actually a callback to a topic a little earlier in the week. You may remember that Alabama strength and conditioning coach Scott Cochran, good friend of yours, saw someone on the sidelines with a cell phone, and, well, once Cochran saw that, here's what happened. Cochran goes over, grabs the phone, and takes it from him. Now, the weird thing about this is we still don't know who this guy is. At least I haven't seen this anywhere on the internet, even though this video is everywhere. And this week on the SEC Coaches Teleconference, Nick Saban actually talked about this subject. Here's the quote from Saban on what happened. He says, I think if you're on the sideline, you need to be focused on the game. No one's allowed to have a cell phone on the sideline. We have a rule against cell phones on the sideline. It's a focus issue. I don't know what more to say about it. But here's the thing. That's true if it's a coach or a player, but this guy's got a camera around his neck.
Yeah.
Is this a media member? Is it okay for an Alabama staffer to rip a cell phone from a guy that may be in the media here? That's what I can't figure out.
No, I think what you're missing here is probably the video from 15 seconds later where Cochran comes back over laughing and hands the cell phone back to the guy and is saying, you know what, I'm just kidding. We do have a no cell phone policy. I don't know if Nick Saban even knows who it is. I mean, honestly, Nick Saban's probably, he's probably heard of the video and he's probably like, I don't know. I didn't go ask Cochran who he snatched a cell phone from. I have asked a couple people, and I'm looking down at my phone right now. I haven't heard back from any of them about who this guy actually was. I know the reason he snatched the phone. I know he was probably just kidding around. I still haven't been able to figure out who the guy was and what his title was.
Scott Franklin says, hey clown, why are you sorry, I almost missed your clown emoji. Scott says, hey clown, why are you talking to the cell phone? Because I'm actually kind of fascinated by this, because this is like the only thing in the world that exists today that we don't find out the answer to it in 2 seconds. Anybody who does anything, think about, like all these like viral videos you see in sports, politics, everything else. We learn who these people are in 2 seconds. How do we still not know the culprit holding the cell phone here?
Yeah, how does ESPN not have a satellite image of where everybody was at on the field? And I don't know. I'm with you though. It is it's interesting to look at.
Jeremy Pettis says that's a 5-star camera guy. Saban needs him to focus. Maybe that's the case. Alabama's got so many 4- and 5-star guys on this roster. The only person allowed on the camera, on the sideline with the camera, is also a 5-star cameraman as well.
Yeah, Coach Saban says it all the time. Do your job. He needs everybody. He needs everybody involved.
Well, speaking of doing our jobs, let's do ours right now. It's AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And let's get ready to take a look here at our MyBookie Best Bets. Here are the point spreads for the games this weekend around the SEC. Let me start with Georgia at Vanderbilt. Now, Georgia last week put up a big blowout score against the Vols of Tennessee. Comfortable win against Mississippi State before that. 17.5, too many points in Nashville on Saturday.
I think this is interesting for one reason, because this is the same spread that Bama had against Vanderbilt.
Is that right?
If you look at it, I mean, you just kind of start to compare the two. That's the way they had Bama lining up. Now, a lot of things have changed since then. I think Georgia's reputation has gotten a lot better and Vanderbilt's has gotten a lot worse, but that is still the same spread, and I think that's an interesting to look at. I don't know that any of them jump out at me. These are not any bets that I'm like really looking forward to, but there are a lot of interesting
My thought about the Georgia offense is it's not quite there yet where I'm going to say that Georgia is a absolute guarantee to cover against anybody right now. Now, Vanderbilt's not really, really good. 17.5 on the road's a lot of points. I think it's an easy Georgia win. 17.5 still seems like a lot of points. Auburn minus 22.5 versus Ole Miss. We've seen Ole Miss quit before. They quit under Hugh Freeze back in the 2014 season. For an interim coach right now, he's not coming back next year after losing 66-3 last week. I think there's a decent chance Rebels just pack it in here on Saturday as well. I think they've quit. I think Auburn probably blows out Ole Miss here too. I would lay this big number for Auburn here.
Yeah, it's tough. You just never know what you're getting at Ole Miss right now. They're not playing towards anything but pride, and so pride can carry you a lot of different directions at a lot of different times. times. But I'm with you. I don't know that they cover this number against Auburn. I think Auburn's going to win this game, probably score a couple of garbage time touchdowns, put it out of reach.
I think Florida's a 2.5-point favorite. Feels about right. I think if Florida wins, it's by a field goal here. If you're a Gator fan, you think it's going to be easy because LSU lost to Troy last week. That's just not how college football works.
Well, listen, if you talk to most bookies too, 2.5 points that's what you get for playing at home. You're going to get 2.5 points because you're at home. So without those points, those are two even teams. And I don't think a lot of Florida fans see it that way. I think I think they're a lot better than LSU. So that's an interesting spread in itself.
All right, let's knock out a few more of these here real quick. Arkansas, South Carolina. I'm assuming this is South Carolina. I think Arkansas is the worst team in the league. I'll take South Carolina to actually win that game on the road. Bama, huge favorite on the road at Texas A&M. That's as big a number as you'll see an SEC team lay on the road against a team that's probably going to a bowl. I mean, Alabama covering that big of a number.
Texas A&M 4-1, Alabama 5-0, and it's interesting to see 26.5. The question I have is, can Kellen Mond get Texas A&M to the end zone more than once? And that's the question that keeps popping up in my mind.
That's a good question.
I've flipped back and forth, but I don't know if I see it happening. Kellen Mond, for everything he's done, great. I don't know that he's the leader and the quarterback that you need right now to even keep this close against Bama. If Bama unleashes their second string in the second half, and I say unleashes for a reason because they have been nasty the last couple of weeks, I think this game gets out of hand as well.
Derek Lee Wedlin in our comment section laughing about the 2.5-point spread for Florida LSU. I'm telling you, Gators fans, you better be careful. You act like this thing's going to be easy because you think LSU looks bad. That is just not how college football works. It is not. And then you got the Missouri-Kentucky game. I don't care one way or another. I don't care which team wins. I don't care what time the game is. I do not give a rip about it. I don't care one thing about Kentucky.
Well,
Missouri.
it is interesting because I think Kentucky this weekend is actually one of the safest bets you can make. Sitting there at 9.5, Missouri has shown me nothing. Like, you know, I talk about developing an identity. I think Florida has an identity as a team that can win close games. I think, you know, everybody else is developing an identity. I don't know what Missouri is. I don't know what, if anything, they are good at. I love Kentucky.
I don't want to watch that game. I don't want to read about it on the internet. I hope I don't see anybody tweeting about it. I don't give a rip about Kentucky, Missouri.
I don't blame you.
But I do care about this. You know, a lot of you, when you hear us talking about point spreads, you say, I can pick games better than that. Well, when you win games, you want to make sure that you get that fast no-hassle payout. That's what our friends at MyBookie are known for. And right now, our friends at MyBookie, the website's mybookie.ag, they've got an even better offer for you than that. Because right now, for SEC Country Live viewers, they're going to give you a chance to get your first deposit matched up to 100%. But you've got to use the promo code SEC Live. A little different than our regular name. It's SEC Live. That's our promo code. Go to mybookie.ag, enter that promo code. You have a chance to get your first deposit matched up to 100%. You play, you win, you get paid. It is simple as that. Mybookie.ag online. SEC Live with the promo code. Good luck, and hope you enjoy getting that first deposit match. Now, here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, let's move on to what are you laughing about, by the way?
Our guy, Bo Molinari, in the comment section says Tennessee's going to be the underdog this week.
Bo, that's a pretty good line.
Tennessee, the underdog versus the bye.
I knew if you were laughing out loud in the comment section, that'd be pretty good. And Bo, that is a pretty good one. All right, let's move on here to item number 6 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10. Let's speaking of the LSU-Florida game, we're obviously talking a lot about that game today. We'll have Zach Abolverdi coming up in a little less than 10 minutes from right now. We'll talk to him some more about it. But what I think is interesting here is coming from the LSU sideline, where apparently this week Lowell Narcisse, the freshman quarterback for LSU, has been kind of working in kind of a scout team role, because apparently LSU is expecting a lot of Kadarius Toney on Saturday, at least thinking about that, and not just running the football, also throwing it as well. Do you expect to see a different wrinkle from Florida offensively?
I definitely do. We've seen the Wildcat the last few weeks. I don't know if they call it the Wild Gator or what they're calling it down there, but Kadarius Toney, to me, is one of the best athletes on the field for Florida right now. And it's crazy to say that as a true freshman. We saw him do some good things in the spring game. I really thought that he had earned these snaps going into the year, and you see it starting to play out where he's a guy that can break this game open, especially when you looked at the way that LSU defense played last week. They looked lackluster at the linebacker position. Putting that Wildcat in, going away from Felipe Franks, and giving your own self on offense an extra blocker for this Florida offense, I think that makes all the difference in the world. I can't wait to get Zach Abolverdi's opinion on this, because I think that you get Kadarius Toney at least 10 snaps in the Wildcat this weekend. I think that makes the difference in the game, in my opinion.
Quasi McDowell says Florida 38, LSU 10. Here's what I'm going to say. And I know I'll hear from a lot of Florida fans on this who say I've been wrong about Florida all year long. For the most part, I kind of have, except for the Michigan game. I got that one right. But for the most part, I've been wrong about Florida all season long. Totally understand. But these Florida fans who act like this thing's a no-brainer, easy win for Florida, the tune of 38-10, I think a blowout is equally likely on both sides. I think Florida is just as likely to blow out LSU is Florida. I don't see a blowout happening here at all. This idea that somehow Florida is way better on paper than LSU because it squeaked back past Kentucky when Kentucky didn't have a defense on the field. I just think that I think that you're totally overrating what Florida has done, and I think you're discrediting the fact that while LSU has been a mess, This is still a talented roster.
No, I agree with you. I don't see a blowout going either way. I'll be shocked if that's what happens because you know what? For the most part, both of these teams for a lot of the year haven't been able to get out of their own way offensively. And so you're going to tell me all of a sudden they're going to go up against an emotional game against a rivalry opponent and are going to win by 4 touchdowns? I don't see it happening either way. I think it's going to be a very good game and a game that is closely called on both sides.
But let me go back to the Kadarius Toney conversation for a moment. Is the fact that LSU is preparing for Toney. We actually talked on yesterday's show about Malik Zaire, who had some good numbers in his previous matchup against LSU when he played in the bowl game for Notre Dame back in 2014. Is the fact that there's so much talk this week about the dual threat option, the Wildcat style quarterback. Is that about a lack of faith in Felipe Franks for this game?
I think it is. I think it is, and I think that's the reason Felipe Franks didn't get to start last week. I think that for everything that Felipe Franks does well, and for you feel like you can kind of develop a little bit of the downfield passing game with that arm he has. I think that Jim McElwain was more willing to open the playbook for Luke Del Rio because he trusted him not to make mistakes more. I think that's how you can angle those two different quarterbacks. Felipe Franks, yes, a lot of arm talent, can wing it downfield 70 yards. But for everything Luke Del Rio didn't give you, I think they felt more comfortable letting him kind of take the reins. I don't think you see that this week. I think that the game plan is going to be very guarded for what they allow Felipe Franks to do. And Kadarius Toney, in my mind, possibly Malik Zaire, comes in and gets a lot of those snaps to kind of take some of the burden off him.
And just remember this when it comes to Felipe Franks. It's a very emotional game for him. Right. Remember, one point in time he was an LSU commit. Decommits from LSU to go to Florida. I think LSU, they still remember that. Franks will obviously still remember that. And you know this from having played the game. Those broken allegiances, broken ties when it comes to recruiting, they have a way of spicing up football games. This Florida-LSU rivalry already pretty spicy, and I think that probably adds a little juice to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw it play out for a number of my teammates when they go to play teams that they were at one time committed to or states they were from, and it does kind of overtake your personality. I mean, for a lot of that game, you play with a lot of emotions, and that can turn into a really, really good thing. There are other times when that's really bad, and you start to take chances that you might not should have done.
All right, AT&T's SEC Country Live. Mike Johnson, Brandon Adams, AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Before we get Zach Elba, we've already talked a little bit more about the Gators. I want to show you this right on number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and I think there's a legitimate question to be asked here. Is this the greatest internet parody of all time? Because as a way of previewing Saturday's game between Texas A&M and Alabama, one A&M fan has sort of looked at the fear that Alabama strikes in all its opponents, and it reminds him of a pretty popular horror movie at the moment. If you haven't seen this, let me show you a little bit of what one fan did comparing Bama to the movie It. Take a look.
There you go. She's all ready, Captain.
Thanks, Billy.
All right, here comes Saban, y'all. Watch this.
What happened?
Oh my God.
So you see on your screen there, it's at Cuppy Cup. Y'all got to go check this guy on Twitter, or person on Twitter. I don't know if it's a guy or gal, but check this person out. We didn't get a chance to show you the whole video because it's frankly just too good, and we wanted to kind of condense it down just to give you a little taste of it. You got to watch this whole video. Is this the greatest thing you've ever seen?
If there's a better parody video out there, or I don't know, hype video, whatever you want to call this, if there is one out there, I've yet to see it. I swear that the production value from what this guy did.
How long does something like this take?
I mean, I was awestruck watching this video. That was hilarious.
Yeah, this is John Rosado says this is the greatest thing ever. Diedrich Frazier giving you the smiley face emojis. Jeremy Pettis says greatness. He also says we're going to smash the Aggies. Maurice Carter loving it too. I mean, it is so perfect, so well put together. My favorite part is, and I haven't seen the movie yet, the kid runs into the barricade. I mean, like, that is good stuff. Now, I guess to bring this back to football, does A&M need to be that afraid of Alabama on Saturday?
I don't think so. Listen, everybody's been talking about Kevin Sumlin and how they've reacted to the UCLA game. Kevin Sumlin, win or lose, I don't think you're going to be any better or any worse off at A&M for your job security. I think they go out, try to execute their game plan, get Kellen Mond going early, try to get the ball in Christian Kirk's hand, to develop that run game if you can against Alabama's defense. But I just don't see a path. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody else can tell me. I'm not trying to be Bama Homer here. I don't see a path to victory for A&M this weekend. I don't think that Kellen Mond has the snaps. I don't know if he has the mental mindset yet to be able to go out and win this game.
Yeah, I think that's probably true too. And I think for Alabama, the thing you always get interested in for games like this is Alabama motivated? Do they care? We've seen them at times against overmatched opponents just kind of go through the motions, take the win, move on to next week. There's something about the way that Saban's approaching this team right now where they do seem to have that extra motivation. They had no reason to beat Ole Miss 66-3 last week. They just kind of wanted to. They had no real reason to beat Vanderbilt 59-0. They sort of orchestrated this deal where the guy insulted them with the "We want Bama," but the truth is that was just a button they felt like pushing. We see Alabama from time to time kind of go into these modes where they just want to like roll people, and right now Alabama's in that mold. I think they're giving a lot of points in this game to be on the road, but I wouldn't put it past Alabama to cover this number either.
I wouldn't either, and it has been funny to kind of see the fans' reactions to the last couple of weeks of Nick Saban trying to get his team up and running, because you've seen a lot of parody accounts come out and people trying to fake like they're A&M players on Twitter and then writing bad stuff about Alabama. Christian Kirk accounts and Texas A&M official accounts writing bad stuff about Alabama, hoping it seeps through the team. I think it's been hilarious. I love the angle that Nick Saban has taken, but I don't know if you're going to see it this week, and I don't know if they're going to need it this week. I like Bama probably more than I did against Ole Miss last week against A&M.
Yeah, I think for me, and by the way, we'll get Zach Abolverdi here in just a moment. We'll let you know when he's ready to go. We'll talk some Florida Gators with him. But I think for me, the A&M evaluation right now, and that's ongoing, I think it's almost separate from whatever's happening here with Alabama. I think A&M still may be fine this season. Their overall win-loss record at the end of the year might actually look okay, despite the hysteria that's been kind of around the program because of some close wins against what should be overmatched teams and the obviously bad collapse against UCLA. But it's almost like you take out the Alabama game from that equation. It's the outlier that you just sort of drop off from the evaluation. And if you're an A&M fan, you hope there's no mental fatigue that you get or just flat out injuries because of how physical Alabama is. You hope that you come out of this game ready to focus on your future opponents and Alabama doesn't end up beating you twice.
Yeah, and I hate to tell A&M fans this, but from what I see and where I'm sitting, the dreaded 8-5, 9-4 season, I feel like is what you're going to get this year. And I think a lot of fans will probably be happy with that, considering that you're playing with Kellen Mond at quarterback and he is a true freshman. You don't really have a lot of things set up going in your direction. I think they've done some good things. I still like Kevin Sumlin. I know he's been on the hot seat. I've had some questions about how he's coached, but I still like him as a coach. But LSU fans are faced with that decision. We've talked about Les Miles, Mark Richt, Butch Jones, these kind of middle-of-the-road coaches. At what point do you want to move on from that guy?
All right, let's say hello to Zach Abolverdi in Gainesville, Florida. Here, we'll talk some Florida LSU with him. And I was going to ask, does he still have the beard? Boy, he does.
Yes,
Look
sir.
at that thing coming in this week. Man, Zach, that is a good-looking beard right there, my friend. You got it growing in all areas, nice and thick. Don't think I didn't notice.
You guys like it?
I'm really impressed. Very, very handsome, very debonair. You
well,
compete
the wife
with.
liked it.
Yeah.
Well, that's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
As long as she likes it, that's all that matters. Hey, let me ask you this. There's been some talk on our show this week about maybe the LSU-Florida rivalry, a game that we've been excited about for months because of the way that it's sort of built here since the cancellation from last year, but maybe some thoughts that it's not quite as big a game anymore because LSU is not as good as some people probably thought they would be. Is this still a big game given the fact that LSU just lost to Troy a week ago?
I think that it's a bigger game for LSU because all of the negativity that's surrounding Ed Orgeron, he seems to be losing the fan base. I can't imagine that his players are very confident right now where things are headed. So this is a game for them to, if they can come into the swamp, I think that they're going to be able to compete with Florida if they get guys back and if they're just healthy. They're still a talented football team, and I think that if you're going to lose and be upset on homecoming to a non-conference opponent, having Troy be the team that beats you is not the worst thing in the world. Now, all that being said, this is a game that Florida should win. I think that it's a game that they should be able to flex some of the improvement that they made offensively. And just, they're a young defense, the Gators are, and they've had some struggles. I think just when you look at how much the LSU has had issues on that side of the ball, this could be a game for Florida to potentially get a confidence booster for its defense if it can make some plays. I don't think that the Gators will score as many points as maybe they would be capable of if they had Del Rio and Tyree Cleveland, who's out with the high ankle sprain. But I do expect Florida to be able to put up points in this game.
One of the questions we've had, and we've talked about this a couple of times today, is what is the trust level at for Jim McElwain right now with Felipe Franks? Obviously, you see Luke Del Rio play last week. He gets injured. Is the game plan going to change at all? How much are we going to see Kadarius Toney? Are we going to see any of Malik Zaire? How is Jim McElwain starting to tweak things now that Felipe Franks is back in the driver's seat?
Well, I think the good thing for this coaching staff is now that they have some tape on Felipe. They have, not just a small sample size, but several games that they can look at. They know what his strengths and weaknesses are. They know, how they should attack teams moving forward and kind of what is, too much on his plate, and also the things that he can do really well to get the offense going. I think he's the guy. I think that he has the skill set that they want to build their offense around. I just think that it's going to really come down to how much can he grasp, how much can he take on, and then how much do they choose to mix in a Kadarius Toney, maybe even a Malik Zaire if Franks isn't able to do some of the things in the offense. But the way that he played in the second half against Vandy, some of the positives that he showed, I do expect that they're still going to be able to put up points. I think missing Cleveland is going to hurt this week. I expect him to be back by the Georgia game, and I think that they'll need him for that matchup. But Florida should still be able to run the offense that it wants to. If they were going to be more explosive, more dynamic in the passing game, make more plays, it was going to be with Franks at quarterback and not necessarily Del Rio. I think the operation would have been better with Luke under center.
Let me finish up with this. When you look at the running back position of Malik Davis, a guy that I know is drawing some rave reviews there down in Gainesville, is this truly the emergence of a star running back for the Gators here? I know he's in there because of Jordan Scarlett's suspension and subsequent absence.
Sure.
Is this what it's all about for Malik Davis, that he's stepping up at the right time and becoming the next star on the offensive side for Florida?
He's really been a pleasant surprise. I don't think that even the coaches knew that he could make this much of an impact. I think that they realized that he had this talent. Obviously, they wouldn't have recruited him and brought him in, especially with Darius Lemons. I mean, folks, I think are going to get to know his name one day too. But right now, Malik Davis, he's getting all the praise, and rightfully so. He's made the most of his opportunities. And while Mark Thompson is the senior upperclassman, LaMichael Pirine is the guy that had the experience coming into the year, and we all figured would be the starter and the feature back, now we're starting to see that Davis is kind of making the most, and he's doing more simply than those guys are. He's averaging more yards per carry. With each game, he seems to be getting better. And we heard from Juwan Sider this week, the running back coach, and he's just absolutely thrilled with the guy. And he said that he still has a chip on his shoulder. He's still only scratching the surface of his potential. And I think that you're going to continue to see him be a focal point of Florida's offense moving forward.
Zach, it's always great to have you here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. We appreciate your coverage of the Gators there and Florida recruiting, of course, at SECCountry.com. We'll look forward to speaking to you again on our show very soon. Thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me.
And I thought that Zach made a really good point about the Florida defense. Most of our questions were offensive-centered, but this has been a Florida defense that has struggled. And he said, hey, maybe this LSU game is a game where the Florida defense can gain some confidence in itself once again. And I thought that Chase Toole was also kind of talking about that in the comment section a little bit as well, that shut down this LSU running game. Darius Geis would seem to be, not 100% if he's even going to play at all. That seems to be kind of a weird situation right now for LSU. But this idea that LSU's bad enough offensively that Florida's defense can actually feel pretty good about itself after this game.
Yeah, and it's tough to disagree with that. I think there's obviously been a bunch of questions about what Florida has on the defensive side of the ball. Some nicked up guys up front, some guys that you're not sure what you're getting. You thought Jabari Zuniga and CeCe Jefferson, for everything coming into the year, they were going to be game wreckers. And those guys have played well. But I think this game does stand out as a time for them to kind of attack Danny Etling in the backfield, really set off that third down defense, because I don't know that LSU is going to be able to pick up that yardage on the early downs to get Danny Etling out of third and long. It does set up as a game where if everything goes according to Florida's plan, they could get their defense pointed in the right direction.
Justin Goodwin asks a good question. He says, would McElwain be on the hot seat if LSU wins on Saturday? And listen, y'all know how this works. Everybody's in the hot seat after every sort of big loss they have, and there is this thing where a lot of Florida fans are talking up McElwain right now and feeling pretty good about what they've got going on there in Gainesville. You let this game go the other way, and at a 2.5-point spread, that would not be the craziest upset that's happened this season, not by a long shot. You let this thing go the wrong way, and let's listen to what Florida fans are saying about McElwain on Monday.
Yeah, and it's tough, and it's like you mentioned, I could see this game going either way, because for everything you can discount LSU about, for the loss against Troy, for the questionable calling against Syracuse, they are still an extremely talented football team. You haven't seen Arden Key really be Arden Key at all this year. Darius Geis off the football field last week. They still have a ton of talent. They can still do some good things. Strong offensive line, getting a couple of defensive line starters back this weekend. So that game, this could easily tilt in LSU's favor.
Bruce Bowers, by the way, has a really good question in the comment section. He said, have we shown the giant hay of, it's like a hay statue? I don't even know what you call it. It's like a I don't know if it's a scarecrow or what, of Nick Chubb. The truth is, Bruce, one of the guys that works with us, Nate, had sent that to me. We were supposed to put that in the show, and I forgot to. We'll make sure we show that next week. Thank you for bringing it to my attention, because Nate had seen that and wanted me to see that. It's this really cool sort of like Nick Chubb made out of hay. It's like a autumn I don't even know what you call it, scarecrow. I'm really not even sure what you describe it as, but it's a pretty cool looking Nick Chubb creation. We'll make sure we show that next week here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, because I kind of butchered the description right there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it looks like. I can't wait to see the picture.
But one of our guys sent a picture of it to me, and now we'll make sure we get it into the show next week, Bruce. We'll make sure we do that for sure. For now, though, let's move on to item number 8 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. I want to ask you about Butch Jones for a moment, because I thought our buddy Mike Griffith had a pretty interesting piece at SECCountry.com this week where he looked at the scenario in which that Butch Jones could save his job. And I thought Mike brought up a good point. Much like we said for Texas A&M a moment ago, just take the Alabama game out of it for a second. Let me show you Tennessee's remaining schedule. Discounting the Alabama game here for a moment, South Carolina, Kentucky, Southern Miss, Missouri, LSU, Vanderbilt. In the case of LSU, that's a worse team than we would have thought. Missouri's terrible. Vanderbilt may not be very good. We still don't know about Kentucky. That's probably a close game. South Carolina, certainly a close game when they play next Saturday. But it would not be beyond the realm of possibility for Butch Jones to find a way to win all those games except for Alabama. First of all, do you think he could do that? And would he save his job if he did?
Well, let's look at the flip side of it as well. And I've pointed to the Alabama game all year as the one where I think it's really the kind of the point where Butch Jones and maybe the AD, John Curry, go separate ways. Because I think he has to go 2-1 in the next 3 games. I don't think he can go 1-2. I don't think he affords the loss to Kentucky or South Carolina with the loss against Alabama. I think it makes it difficult either way. Let's look at it from the flip side, though. And if you pull back up that schedule, what game are you sure that Tennessee is going to win? You know what I mean? That's kind of how I look at it. Other than Southern Miss, I'm not slam dunking any of these teams against Tennessee. I think it's kind of a coin toss. Butch Jones can definitely go out there and save his job if he loses to Alabama and wins the rest of the games. I think if he hiccups against South Carolina or Kentucky before they get to that Southern Miss game, I think his ship has sailed.
Totally fair. And Bobby Carl says he should be gone. In the comment section, Bobby says he should be gone no matter what. And you're right. It's obviously not a given that Tennessee would win any of those games. The Missouri game, I might say so, and that team's pretty bad right now. But if you look at what happened to Tennessee in some of its losses, obviously got embarrassed against Georgia. It won the Georgia Tech game, even though a lot of people sort of treat it like it was a loss, and it could have won against Florida. So this notion that Tennessee is not going to win all these games, I think that's probably getting a little too ahead of yourself a little bit. I mean, Butch Jones has not handled the situation well. I think he says the wrong things. I think his leadership of Tennessee has not been appropriate. I think this is a situation, though, for the Vols fans who want a new coach. I think it's possible that Butch Jones does more winning here than you're comfortable with.
Probably so. And listen, I've pointed all year that Alabama game and that those weeks leading up to that Southern Miss game, because I think it comes down to those. I don't think it matters what you do Southern Miss and on after that, because I think his story will be told by then. I think if he goes 1-2 in the next 3 games and loses to South Carolina or Kentucky and also Alabama, then I think he's fired. I think if he goes 2-1 in those games and just loses to Alabama, then I think they allow him to finish out the year.
I think that's a really good point. That actually, for Butch's sake, 2 of your toughest games in the stretch, once again, not counting Alabama, which no one's going to give you a shot in, but 2 of your toughest games actually come relatively early here.
Right.
South Carolina is a toss-up. I think Kentucky's probably a little bit of a toss-up as well. So this whole conversation could be over before it starts. But you win those, and all of a sudden that LSU game looks a lot more winnable.
Yep.
And really, there's no other Grizzly Bear left on that schedule other than the Alabama game that, for the most part, we're discrediting.
I agree with you. If he can go 2-1 in the next 3 games, then I think that he has bought his ticket on to the end of the year. I really do. Because you're starting to shape up. Like you said, LSU's not really what you thought they were going to be in that cross-division game. And Butch Jones has shown the ability to win these games. As much as we give him about his job that he's done at Tennessee, he's shown the ability to win these games most years.
Michael Collins says, please keep Butch, LOL, go Dogs. And a lot of non-Tennessee fans probably feel that way. That'd be great to see Butch Jones stick around there in Knoxville. A lot of Tennessee fans want him gone. Watch what happens over these next few games. There may not be enough losses to justify this. This is not over yet. This is not a story that I think has been completely written as of yet.
I agree. And to me, there's a lot of stuff going on. And somebody mentioned it earlier today that once John Curry fires Butch Jones, his clock starts ticking too.
That's
because
true.
He's going to have to make that hire. And that's going to be on him. Right now, he's kind of on bought time where he's still got a honeymoon as a Tennessee AD. As soon as he moves on from Butch Jones, his clock starts ticking. So I think that's also playing into Butch Jones' favor.
Bobby Carl says, what is the buyout for Butch Jones? The specific figure escapes my mind at the moment, but it's not an insignificant figure for sure. It's definitely something that Tennessee has to think of, which is another reason why if he starts winning games, a new AD like John Curry may want to at least hold on and keep it where it is. All right, let's talk some more LSU here for item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10. And I want to get into a couple of issues here. First of all, there is the really strange meeting that got called this week where you have the athletic director, Joe Oliva, involved with Ed Orgeron and both coordinators. You have the coaches meeting with the players. You have the players meeting by themselves. A lot of meetings going on this week, a lot of air being cleared because of the loss to Troy. And this strikes a lot of people as weird, including Trevor Manich, who was recently on ESPN saying that he's never really seen anything like this before. Here's Manich.
This is something I've never seen before. I mean, to have the athletic director meet with both the head coach and the offensive and defensive coordinators in the first September of this head coach's administration. That, to me, is completely unheard of. The optics are about as horrible as they could possibly be.
You agree with that? Does that signal really bad optics that apparently Ed Orgeron can't even be trusted to run his own meeting right now, that Joe Oliva is going to be there to run the meeting for him, and that you have to have this go-between between the coordinators who maybe have their own grievances they want to air and Joe Oliva, that Orgeron's got to be in the room to hear all of that? Is it as unorthodox and unheard of as Trevor Manich, the analyst for ESPN, just described it on television recently?
I think it's a bad look, but stick with me here when I say this. I think this is a actually worse look for Joe Oliva than it is Ed Orgeron or his staff. I think that this is such a reactionary move for Joe Oliva. I feel like what he did was pull Ed Orgeron and the coordinators in and say, look, we could all lose our jobs at the end of this year.
Yeah.
If you guys don't start playing better, I need to know what's going on. I think it's a bad look for Joe Oliva because it's reactionary. I mean, every good coach I've ever had, and obviously this is an AD, this is not a coach speaking, but has said you shouldn't have to lose to learn the lessons. If you can win and still learn the lessons, that's when you get a lot better. Right now, they lost, and they're trying to learn lessons, and Joe Oliva is reacting, and he's bringing the coaches in. I think he's saying, hey, look, we could all lose our jobs by the end of the year. I don't think it's a good look for him at all.
And by the way, when you talk about these meetings, what's going on here, it's not just complaints about Orgeron or Matt Canada. I know that Orgeron took some of that publicly after the game on Saturday. It's also some of the players here as well. I mean, look what a former LSU player, Booger McFarland, recently tweeted about his analysis of his alma mater. He says LSU, they're soft on both the offensive and the defensive line. Arden Key, that's the name that LSU fans will tell you at the beginning of the season was supposed to be the best player. He's playing for the NFL right now and not for LSU. Canada looks lost on offense, and Coach O has to fix it. Soft, he says. Let me go to the middle part of that discussion where Booger says that Arden Key's not even worried about LSU right now. Yeah. He's only thinking about the NFL. You better believe that if that kind of stuff is really going on, and maybe you could say the same thing about Darius Geis right now too, you better believe that's coming up in these meetings as well. A lot of players who may be young in their college tenure looking at some of these veterans and saying, hey, you're not giving it your all for this team right now.
Yeah, and if you thought it was bad before the loss against Troy, I would look for it to get even worse because all of a sudden you're not playing for a championship. You're not playing to be in the college football playoff or to get to Atlanta at the end of the year. All of a sudden Arden Key looks around and goes, what's left for me to do? I think what Arden Key has to be really careful about, and you and I, we talked about this before the beginning of the year. We did not expect that Arden Key, I didn't at least, think that he was going to be the Arden Key to pass. You just don't miss spring games. Yeah. You don't have shoulder surgery and miss camp and try to come in the middle of the year and be in game shape. He's looked winded. He's looked lazy. And for me, if he's looking at the NFL, his stock has beyond plummeted. I saw Booger McFarland on today in College Football Live, and he's saying, you know what? I talked to a scout that said that Arden Key right now is not even draftable. You can't even draft the guy right now the way he's playing like that.
Wow, that's a big statement.
I think that says volumes. I really do about the way he's playing right now, and it says a lot to me about the LSU team as a whole.
Tyler Mann says, what are the chances that Orgeron makes it the next season? He's going to coach next year, I believe. I don't think you can fire anybody after just 1 year. There would have to just be a real bad finish to get to that point. Dustin Goodwin said Manich also said Notre Dame's running backs are better than Georgia, so maybe what does he know? That's probably a fair point. Tyler Mann also says Joe Oliva said, you guys are going to get me fired. He needs to go right now. Stephen Early says, who knows, LSU might just go back and buy the entire AD and staff of Troy since, they just lost to Troy. So a lot of fun being had at the expense of LSU at the moment.
Yeah, and it stinks, and you never want to be that team that's kind of on the bottom right now. And I will say this, I don't think Ed Orgeron gets fired this year, but if they do end up having as bad a season as the outlook looks right now, Joe Oliva will not have a job. They will bring in an entirely new AD in the offseason, and that AD will be telling Ed Orgeron, look, your job will be on the line next year.
But let me tell you this one thing, though, and this is an important point to bring up. part of the reason why Oliva's in trouble is because he's sort of viewed as being this rogue athletic director, given how he handled the Florida situation last year. I was on his side on that. What's the phrase some people use sometimes? Getting rooked, because he's a young athletic director. Florida, this sort of venerable SEC institution, thought it was going to bully LSU and bully Oliva in particular to getting what it wanted out of that game last year. And Joe Oliva stood up to Florida on that. I didn't have a problem with him doing that. Now, he may have made the wrong hire here when it comes to Ed Orgeron, and LSU fans will tell you he definitely made the wrong hire when it comes to Johnny Jones as a basketball coach. But in terms of sticking up for Florida and trying to do what was right for his university, I thought Oliva was on the right side of that issue, even though obviously LSU lost the game once it was finally played.
Well, and to me, that's not even one of the strikes that go against him.
Oh, I think it is.
I think that's probably plays out on the national scene, but I think when you look at the way the president looks at how the AD should run the football program, that hiring and firing decision for Les Miles and the way that coaching search was conducted last year was a black eye on the university, in my opinion. I mean, I really do. If you're going to announce that Tom Herman's going to be the coach and that's going to leak out, and then he winds up at Texas and you hire the interim guy in Orgeron, who is not looking good right now, I think that looks as ugly as anything he's done.
That is Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. This is AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live, entertainment your way. We will do our AT&T look ahead in just a moment, taking a look at all the big games coming up in the SEC this week. Before we get to that, though, let's do item number 10 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10. So, kind of an interesting deal for the South Carolina-Arkansas game on Saturday, given that David Williams, longtime player for South Carolina, spent 3 years in Columbia. He is now at Arkansas. And you know what? Maybe he's giving a look to Arkansas about exactly what to expect from South Carolina on Saturday. Here's what the Arkansas defensive coordinator Paul Rhodes had to say about that. I think there is insight that a player can always provide physically about kids. You get an idea of what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, potentially. So Rhodes is not denying that Williams here may have a little inside information. Do you think it helps Arkansas to have a player that used to play for South Carolina?
Maybe like this much. Maybe in your game plan or one-on-one situations where, hey, this left guard's going to be going against this defensive tackle. Maybe he knows what moves he does or doesn't have or knows which side he wants to rush from. Very, very few times, though, does that really pop up in a game because guess what? There's still game plans. You still don't know as a defensive player what the offense is going to run and vice versa. And you can go in there and look and say, hey, I know signals or I know what their defense is going to do in this situation. It doesn't always help. You haven't been inside that program. You don't know what kind of tweaks they've made throughout this year. I saw it a couple of times in my playing career. We'd have transfers. We'd have guys move around. We'd have coaches come over. And there would be some of those whispers, but you never put all your eggs in that basket. You prepared the same way you did because you never know what really is going on in that other program.
It is a big game on Saturday for both these programs, though. Let's take a look at that and the rest of our SEC slate here as we do our AT&T look ahead to the big games on Saturday in the Southeastern Conference. Georgia Vanderbilt get things started at noon Eastern time. Ole Miss Auburn, a chance for Auburn to keep pace as a national contender. The main event, probably 3:30 between LSU and Florida, a game that I still think is a crucial contest, even with LSU's struggles. The game we were just discussing, Arkansas, South Carolina, Alabama, Texas A&M, also a night primetime game in the Missouri, Kentucky. Is there a game kind of off the radar that you're excited about this week?
Kentucky and Missouri, to me, I think, just follow me here, I think that the door has shut on Barry Odom if they lose this game going away to Kentucky. I think if this is a 3-touchdown game against Kentucky, which it very well could be, because I would lay my money on Kentucky right now at 9.5-point favorites, there's no coming back from that for me if you're Barry Odom. I think the door gets slammed right in his face. I don't know when they move on from him, but that would be the last straw if I were Missouri.
All right, here on AT&T SEC Country Live, we're always looking to close out our shows the same way each and every day. Much like Tennessee coach Butch Jones looks for champions of life, we look for them too. And today we find one from the world of the college football coaching ranks as Washington State coach Mike Leach was asked a relatively innocuous question. His team's traveling to Oregon, and the reporter says, hey, Oregon, Autzen Stadium, pretty loud. One of the loudest places you've ever played. And Leach gave a much more honest answer than I think some people would have expected. Take a look at this.
Oklahoma's louder, A&M's louder. Texas is on the bubble. Nebraska was definitely louder. LSU's louder. I never went to Alabama. We beat Alabama, but it was at Kentucky. Depending whether or not you add the cowbells, Mississippi State's comparable. Georgia's louder. Florida's louder. Definitely that one end zone at South Carolina's louder. Tennessee's louder.
And believe it or not, Leach wasn't done. Here's the rest of that answer.
Little Rock, Arkansas, that's the loudest place I ever played. Entirely concrete structure. It's as if you had a football game in the neighbor's basement and all the kids were yelling louder than hell. And and you could tell when you were starting out, you clap your hands and you'd hear it 5 times and yell, go, 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 hit, 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 hit. Well, then after and you figure there's 45,000, you multiply that times 5, that equals approximately 250,000. That's a lot of people, and there's no stadiums that hold 250,000 people.
So you get the gist. He goes kind of on and on with that. First of all, how great is that? How much do we need some of that person on in the SEC?
I was going to say, I don't know who's going to make it happen. I don't know what we have to do to get it done or how much money he's going to need. Bring that guy to the SEC, please, for all of us that are involved with this conference.
Patrick Jimenez, a Arkansas fan, also enjoyed the Little Rock shout out there. So, Patrick, we're glad you like that. And thanks for being with us there this week on AT&T SEC Country Live. We appreciate your time. Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, giving a rating and review. That's certainly a big help to us. You can also share the show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know that we're talking about the SEC here each and every day on AT&T's SEC Country Live. We're back again on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Once again, we'll talk about a busy weekend. Hope you enjoy the games, and we'll look forward to seeing you then.